Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southern-appalachian-herbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southern-appalachian-herbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. It is a beautiful fall day here. Sunny, cool. We've had we've had several frosts and a couple of light snows. And of course, my thoughts are turning to wild persimmons, one of my absolute favorite fruits. You only harvest them around the time of the first frost. No one's really sure if the frost actually has the effect on the persimmon of making it sweet, or if it's just coincidental. It coincides with about that time. But when the persimmons, which will be orange to red when they're unripe, begin to turn a light rose color, and then a purplish color starts to come from the inside, that's when they're ripe. They will be very soft, almost like mushy to the touch. Anytime before then, they are so bitter. I mean, if you ever eat an unripe persimmon, you will not do it twice. That's for sure. It's also time to think about all those wonderful fall greens. You know, I am a collard green fanatic. Actually, mustard and turnips are my favorite two greens. Mustard's my all-time favorite. I mean, I can eat mustard greens any time of year. Turnips, I love the leaves and roots cooked together, but they're all so good, and they all benefit from the first frost. It just makes the leaves sweeter, and that's especially true of your collards. Well, I know a lot of my listeners that don't live in the South may not have ever tried collards, or if they had them, they were fixed maybe like kale, and they weren't too good. I mean, I don't know too many people who aren't Italian that really love kale. I mean, let's be honest. But if you there's so many ways of cooking greens too. The way my grandmother always did it, and the way my mother does it. She'll take the collards, just the big old leaves, and watch them. Cut out or tear out the stems, and then just rough chop them. Take a pot and put a little seasoning in there, by which we usually mean fat back, but it could be anything from olive oil to a spoonful of lard, if that's what you got to use. And trust me, you will not. You'll be glad you did if you use lard. Lard is absolutely delicious with greens. So just a little bit, and the greens themselves are still wet, so she doesn't add any liquid to the pot. Just drops them in there, and they start to steam down, cook down. As they cook down, she adds more and more and more to the pot's full. The biggest mistake people make is covering the pot. You can cover it for just a minute to kind of help wilt them down. But if you leave the lid on the pot while greens are cooking, as the sulfur gases cook out of the greens. And if you've ever smelled cooked cabbage, you know that all this family of greens has a little bit of sulfur. It turns into sulfuric acid. And that takes your nice, fresh, bright greens and turns them into a dull brown, like olive drab color, and they don't taste good either. If you cook them uncovered, you get that nice, bright green, really good, bright flavor. It makes a complete, total difference. I mean, some people add sugar to their collard greens. We don't do that, never have. I think the reason they do is because of their experience with tasteless, bitter, nasty greens that have been cooked covered. Now, you can add all kinds of stuff to your greens. Specifically with collards, people often add ham hocks or smoked turkey. absolutely wonderful. A little bit of country ham is always good. Um, in other states, mainly, part of South Carolina, definitely going to Louisiana and such, they'll add chicken broth, and that's very good too. Chicken broth, and in Louisiana, they do what they call the Trinity of vegetables. You know, they put in the celery and onions and what are you thinking? Collard greens just go usually celery, onions, maybe a little garlic. I don't think most people put tomato in there. But you know, everybody has their own specific recipe, and they're so good. But the other thing, if you don't like collards, maybe you haven't been served them correctly, is always when you put them on the plate, add a little vinegar. Now, what we always do is we take hot peppers, jalapenos, serranos, cayenne, whatever we got, Tabasco peppers, whatever, you know, put them in a jar and pour apple cider vinegar in there and let them sit for a couple of months till the vinegar gets nice and hot. And like I said, we don't use any sugar or anything. A lot of people will actually make a chutney, a chow chow, pickled and sweet combination to put on their collard greens. But let me tell you, if you just have, just greens just simply cooked the way my mother does it, the way my grandmother did it, just in the pot with a little seasoning and a little salt, cook them till they're tender enough to eat, put them on a plate, and put a little hot pepper vinegar on there. It will probably absolutely change your mind about greens. This is a true delicacy of the South. You know, when we look at what we call a gourmet flavor, you're looking for a combination of flavors. You know, you have essentially five senses of taste, kind of debatable, but you have sour, you have sweet, you have bitter, you have savory, and then there's that fifth flavor that they call umami, which is the flavor of mushrooms or the flavor of browned meat as opposed to meat that hasn't been browned. It's that what I would call richness. Some people think of richness as being fatty, but to me, it's that rich taste. And when you take collard greens, you cook them the right way, they're going to be bitter, they're going to be sweet, bittersweet. The bitter is not overly stated. I mean, it's very subtle bitterness, subtle sweetness, savoriness from being cooked with the oil and fat. And then you put the hot pepper vinegar on there, and you've got your sour, you've got your pungent, you've got all those nice flavors, and it all comes together to get that umami flavor. And I think, greens are a true Southern delicacy, but they should really be on everybody's table. It's just y'all got to get away. Let me tell you, as a Southerner, y'all got to get away from this whole low fat thing. Go out and get the Weston A. Price cookbook. It's called Nourishing Traditions. It tells the whole story of how the whole low fat fad is a complete and utter fraud that has actually damaged people's health. Our ancestors, let's go back a couple of generations, my grandparents, great grandparents, people did not have diabetes. The type 2 diabetes was not even really diagnosed in America until about 1920. No one had it because nobody was eating enough sugar to get it. They didn't all have cancer. They didn't all have heart disease. They didn't all have high blood pressure. The American Medical Association, the FDA, the USDA, and that whole, cabal of government and medical professionals got together and started pushing this low fat diet under the false premise that eating fat makes you fat or eating fat makes you unhealthy. Natural animal fats are what our body needs most. It's our body's preferred food, fat and protein from animal sources. Sorry, vegetarians, but it's true. They started pushing margarine and they wanted people to get off of butter. Well, when they did that, heart disease went up, cholesterol went up, high blood pressure went up, type 2 diabetes became common. What also happened is people lost their good home recipes, their family traditional recipes that were passed down from, grandmother to grandmother to grandmother. And we lost so much of our culinary heritage. And one of the simplest things you can do right now is just go out and get you some good collard greens or mustard greens and start reintroducing that really good flavor. I mean, the reason people like chili so much, a good bowl of, red chili. Well, green chili too. I like a chili verde, usually made with pork and tomatillos, but just a good old all-American red beef and tomato and sometimes beans. I like beans in mine. I'm not from Texas. I don't have to apologize for it. Chili is because it has those flavors. You've got the savory of the meat and the onions and the garlic. You've got the sweet from the tomatoes and beans, actually. One reason I like the beans. You've got the bitterness because you brown the meat. You might have, roasted or browned peppers. You've got your chili powder and your cumin, a little bitterness, a little pungency. You've got your hot peppers in there, the onions and garlic. That's one of the purest examples of all those flavors coming together to turn simple ingredients into what we would call a gourmet dish. And I'm telling you, you're not going to believe me until you try it yourself. But you get a good plate of collard greens, put some hot pepper vinegar on there, and have a good slice of roast turkey on the side, or fried pork chop, or whatever you like to go with your greens. It will change your life. Trust me, you'll become a honorary Southerner very quickly. So the other thing that was kind of cool this week, there've been these mushrooms popping up. I've been off the mountain, been down in the sandhills again, and it's very difficult for me to go from one environment to another and confidently identify mushrooms without a field guide. And the reason being that, say, in the mountains where I live, you can just put your hand straight down into maybe 2 feet of humus. I mean, we have so much, just leaves falling and build up into such rich, you know, just incredible soil, really. And so tend to have a more alkaline soil. It's clay under all this really, really dense humus and natural mulch and everything, full of worms. Wonderful soil to grow in. Um, Down here in the sandhills where I've been staying for a little bit, the soil is sand, one, but it's just incredibly acidic. I mean, there's nothing that grows here naturally except pine trees and rhododendrons and a few other little things. The same mushroom growing in those two different places have a completely different color and often a different size, shape, and texture. And it's just amazing to compare them side by side. And I have to take a field guide and look at the gills and see where they attach and everything. But the hardest ones to identify are often what we call boletes or boletes. They're the mushrooms that have a spongy underside. What's nice about these is they're probably the members of the mushroom family that have the fewest poisonous members. Okay, they're the the genus of the mushroom family that has the fewest poisonous members, and some of them are absolutely delicious, like porcinis. Porcini is one of the most sought after mushrooms in the world. Some are very bland. It oftentimes depends a lot on where you harvest them. I mean, there's a little patch of what we call slippery jack mushrooms. They're boletes or boletes or uh, Latin volatus. Just don't even worry about that. People pronounce it both ways, and I usually say belay because it comes out easier. The slippery jacks, when they get wet, they have a slippery, like almost mucusy feeling top, which is pretty disgusting. But actually, when you peel that off, where these grow, these are some of the most tasty mushrooms imaginable. I mean, anytime I do some spaghetti sauce or something, I run out and grab some if they're in season. Down here, the same mushroom has no taste to a bad taste. They're not poisonous, but they're very different depending on where they grow. Well, these mushrooms have been popping up all over the place around here. They're sort of a brick red on top and yellow on the other side. And I looked them up as best I could, actually using field guides, and I found probably three mushrooms they could be, three different kinds of billets or boletes, all of which said they weren't good to eat. So I thought, well, okay, consider that a survival food if I ever use it or not. But I just left him alone. Well, here a neighbor stops me and he says, "Are you familiar with these mushrooms?" Because he knows I'm into it. And he said, "Are you familiar with these mushrooms?" And he described them to me. The way he described it said, almost like little pumpkins that come up out from under the pine straw. So I told him how much trouble I'd been having identifying these mushrooms, and he's like, "Look, my neighbor, the lady that just moved in beside me, is Russian, and she's out there in my yard picking these mushrooms, and she tells me how great they are." Well, look, if you know anything about Russians, Russians are absolute mushroom fanatics. Russians eat more wild mushrooms per capita than any other people on earth. And I said, hey, if a Russian tells you these mushrooms are good, I'd give them a try. And I mean, I can't identify this. I can't tell you it's good or not. But if a Russian tells you it is, go for it. So the next day I'm walking the dog and he pulls up. He says, wow, you've got to try these mushrooms. They are absolutely fantastic. Apparently, Um, these mushrooms that I've spent 2 years trying to identify and gave up on, I should have just gone ahead and taken the risk and tried one. They have the flavor and aroma of porcinis. This is such an incredible find down in central North Carolina. I mean, you grab a bunch of those mushrooms, clean them up, maybe stuff your Thanksgiving turkey with them, with a few herbs, maybe some sage and oh, I don't know, some rosemary would be nice, and some onions. Put some onions in that cavity and pop that sucker in the oven, and you're going to have a feast. So that's just one of those things, you know. Um, uh, the leaves have fallen and things are starting to look brown, but we're still surrounded by all kinds of opportunities for just absolutely delicious wild food. Sometimes you have to be a little bit of a risk taker, and that's not obviously not something I can recommend. They say they're old mushroom hunters and they're bold mushroom hunters, but they're no old, bold mushroom hunters. Well, the old trick is that, and if you read any of the old mushroom guides, people got so concerned about being sued, and you know, obviously we live under a plague of lawyers who have limited a lot of the things we used to do. People would take a mushroom they didn't identify, but that they thought was very similar to an edible mushroom they didn't know. And they would take a little bit of it, and of course they would smell it, and they'd touch their lips with it and sit it down and walk away for an hour. Next time they would touch the tip of their tongue to it, walk away for an hour. Each time you're waiting to see, am I having any reaction to this mushroom? You know, is my blood pressure changing? Is my stomach cramping? Anything like that? And eventually they'd end up eating a very small amount of it. Usually they're a little safer cooked than raw, so a little bit cooked, then a little bit raw, then a little bit more. And that's how people figured out what mushrooms were edible and not edible. So, of course, I can't recommend you do that, but you know, I have missed the past 2 years I've been down here, 3 years really. This time of year, I could have filled baskets full of these mushrooms and had them drying, and I'm kicking myself for not doing that. So while I'm not recommending people take risks and take chances, I sure missed out by being a little too uh, safe. So let's get into this week's show. We are going to talk about herbs for burns. This is from my new book, Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People. So when we talk about herbs for burns, of course, a lot of them are going to be your common skin herbs. I mean, we talked about these before in the past two or three shows, where we talked about herbs for cuts, herbs for bruises, herbs for, you know, just various, you know, surface injuries. And chief among those herbs would be arnica. Arnica is a very it's the go-to herb for any kind of external injury. St. John's wort oil is just really good for anything from muscle sprains and bruisings to burns and various skin irritations as well. And the Swedish bitters used externally are also recommended for burns. Last week I went into great detail, great length about the 22 to 25 ingredient large Swedish bitters. And a lot of those herbs are very good for burns. The whole concoction, the whole formula has a certain bitter astringency to it. And the astringent herbs really are very beneficial for burns. And, you know, those are going to be used externally as a wash, a poultice, or a salve. Really just the same way we would have used them for wounds or bruises. The first herbs that come to most people's minds when we talk about herbs for burns are, of course, aloe. You probably got an aloe plant in your kitchen window, and hopefully you use it. Aloe has a viscous mucilaginous gel inside of the leaf, and you can press that out and put it on. And yeah, it really helps with burns. It really helps with cuts as well because it's got an antiseptic quality. But also in that same succulent family, you've got your cacti. Prickly pear cactus, like I talked about last week. I recommended eating the Nepalese for blood sugar issues. Well, those same Nepalese, you take them, and I usually use a torch to burn off the spines, and then just kind of skin them, take the skin off. If you have a burn, you could put that whole pad down there, right on the burn and wrap something around it, keep it in place, and it will help heal that burn. It'll help pull the heat and the soreness out of the burn, and it will help prevent an infection. Cacti are really fantastic to have around. And, you know, Marjorie Wildcraft and others have recommended the Cactus nipalis, the pads, to be used as poultices for snake bites and spider bites and, puncture wounds. Really good stuff to have around. And but also in that category is one that is really, hugely recommended in German folk medicine and in most European uh, herbal medicine. It's called house leek. Now, we don't call this plant house leek in America usually. We call it hens and chicks. If you go down to probably any florist or the little, floral section of your grocery store, they'll have some succulents, and one of them is going to be called hens and chicks. It is called that because you get one um, large plant in the middle, and it has all these little clones, all its little daughter plants all around it in the pot. Fancifully thinking it could look like a mother hen and the chicks all around her, right? Very common, super common, ornamental succulent plant. You will see these in nursing homes and hospitals all over the place, and no one even realizes this is the house leek that was still to this day commonly used in European herbal medicine. It's just like aloe in most of its properties, actually. It's just like aloe. And aloe also has some internal uses. So when I say most of its properties, I'm saying this plant is very useful, and if you can, pick one up when they're probably marked down at the florist this time of year and stick one in your kitchen window and start propagating it, you're going to have a very useful plant for all manner of conditions, but especially burns and cuts and all that. And I do not recommend this one being gathered from the wild. Where it grows wild, it's been very overharvested. But, succulents are so easy to propagate. Usually you just cut off a piece and stick it down in some sandy soil. Don't overwater it, don't underwater it, and it just starts a new plant. They're some of the easiest house plants to grow. But another one that we really think of as a weed is a plant that was introduced to this country as a useful medicinal herb and as a food plant. It's purslane. Purslane, common garden weed. If you look at it, the leaves have that thick, succulent quality. Your succulents are everything from your aloes to your cacti. They all have that gelatinous type of liquid inside of the leaf. Purslane's the same thing. When we eat it, it kind of turns into an okra-like vegetable in the pot. So that same mucilaginous, slimy quality we can use on burns. They all have this gel within the leaves or pads that is soothing, mildly astringent, antibacterial, and healing. The next one is not too commonly used, but one you can look for, butterbur. Um, Butterbur is another one that's just really commonly used in German folk medicine. Father Kunzel said, even more valuable are the leaves of butterbur, the large leaves of butterbur. They are gray below and green above and huge. In the Alps, they look like an umbrella. And yeah, this is a plant I run into every now and then in the wild, and they can get very big, very, very, very big. Inwardly, he says they're excellent against coughs. They should be dried long and carefully in the sun. And, we usually don't want to dry plants in the sun, actually. We want to dry them in the shade in a place where they can get plenty of air. I actually find my attic to be the best place for drying plants. It's an old Yule Givens tip that I picked up. If you have a house with an attic, you're going to probably have a vent or two or three, at least, one on either side that allows the hot air to get out of your house in the summer so it doesn't cook the shingles, basically. If you think about that, that is a giant food dehydrator. If you use it properly, you can set up clothes drying racks or old window screens up there. And, anytime, I mean, it starts getting hot up there, even in the mountains where I live in the spring, and stays hot up there well into the end of October. So you set up your screens or, clothes drying racks or whatever you're using and put your plant matter up there, one single layer, don't have anything overlapping. And then what I do is I pull down the attic door so it's getting a real draft. The air from the inside of the house is going up into the attic and out through the vents. and things dry up in there just as well as they would in a commercial food dehydrator. I mean, try any kind of apples, pumpkin slices. You can use it as a food dehydrator. It's a wonderful food storage device that basically comes built into your house for free that like nobody thinks of, right? So that's actually a really good tip that I got from Will Gibbons. And you can also, now this is something else you may want to look into if you want to cut down your electric bill. Use clothes drying racks up there and set it up just like I said, hot day with the attic door pulled down. It can also be a clothes dryer. I mean, that air is going to move up through your clothes. It's going to heat as it goes through the attic. The humidity is going to go out your vents. And, I don't know. I mean, if you're doing a large volume of clothes, you may be concerned about dampness getting into your attic. But if it's just a few things hung up there, I mean, it's a free clothes dryer sitting on top of your house that requires no electricity to run. So I think that's pretty cool. And of course, you can also set up a fan to help pull more air through there. I put the fan at the vent blowing out, and you can pull a lot of air through there. And yeah, it's a resource that very few people even realize they have, and most people do actually have. But anyway, back to butterburn. Outwardly, the large leaves are invaluable against any kinds of burns. Also can be used for tired feet, infected wounds, and swellings when crushed and applied. The dried leaves are softened in water. In case of severe sprains and dislocations, apply a handful immediately. How many herbs God has sown. Glory and thanks to him. That's Father Johann Kunzel. Lily of the valley is a plant that grows, very commonly around here. And most people think of it as a poisonous plant. Actually, it has digitalis-like properties. Um, in small amounts, it can slow and strengthen the heart rate. In large amounts, it can cause your heart to stop. So that's why we consider it a poisonous plant. Used externally, can be used on burns, but I would be very careful using on broken skin or open wounds. You're using an ointment made from the root, and it's very good for burns. Downy rattlesnake plantain is one of those false plantains, makes a wonderful leaf poultice. Wild mustard is a very interesting one. Wild mustard is the cousin to the same mustard greens I was talking about earlier. It's also the same plant from where we get the condiment mustard made from the seeds. The odd thing about it is the mustard plant, whether it's the leaves or seeds, is hot. It's heating. However, early Americans and Native Americans would make a poultice from the seeds and use it for burns. I don't understand this, but it's been well documented. And it may be kind of going back to that concept of like we talked about before with Monarda bee balm. The heating, irritating poultice somehow seems to soothe and what they say is it draws the burn out. Physiologically, it's not possible, but if that's what it feels like, that's how people described it. This plant is pulling the burning sensation out of the tissue. I don't understand it. They say it pulls the heat out, or they pulls the burn out. This would probably be like my last resort because I don't want to put hot mustard on a burn, but it has been so commonly documented that it must work. I just haven't tried it myself. I would rather eat it. I love mustard. I love mustard in all forms. Um, Clammy ground cherry. When you ground cherries, it's exactly what it sounds like. I mean, if you've seen tomatillo's ground cherry, they call it golden berry. I think pineapple ground cherry, common ground cherry out west. Uh, for this one, you're making a tea of the leaves and roots, and it's used as a wash for burns. Gumweed is such a good herb. It's good for especially as an expectorant for the lungs. It's got a gummy texture to it, and a leaf poultice is very effective for burns. Canada goldenrod, really probably any of the goldenrods. Canada goldenrod is the one I use most often. That's Solidago. It's useful as a wash for burns, and again, that's the astringency. The astringency tightens tissue. That means it's pulling inflammation out of the tissue. It takes away that kind of sticky, inflamed part of the burn that's usually most painful, really. Now, jewelweed or touch me not is going to work in an almost opposite manner. It has, when you crush the stem of it, you get a juice almost like aloe. And you can use jewelweed or touch me not, any way you would use aloe. It also has some analgesic properties. It helps with the pain. It's the absolute go-to for poison ivy and poison oak, by the way. Fireweed is actually one we ended up talking about last week. It pops up. There's been a recent fire. Um, a, a wash, soak made from, or even a poultice really, from the peeled roots is what you want to use. Nice astringent. You can use Hartley 4 o'clock. Supposedly, this is one I have not used. 4 o'clocks are sort of like morning glories. They open and close every day, but they're a totally different family. It's actually the family Mirabilis, or well, that's the name of it. Mirabilis, meaning it's almost like amazing the way it opens and closes every day at 4 o'clock. I'm going to get a lot more into 4 o'clocks in a later date. They have some other really unique properties, and it's an herb I have not used much, but I'm going to look into it. Red clover. Red clover, the blossoms. It makes a nice astringent, soothing wash for the burns. Has some slightly estrogenic-like qualities. It's good for the tissue. Salad burnet is a well, salad burnet is more of a culinary herb that is hardly used at all anymore, and that's a shame. We really ought to be growing this one because the powdered root is not the part you use culinarily. The powdered root is the part we use medicinally, and it has actually been found through clinical trials to be incredibly effective for second and third degree burns. Burdock, a lot like butterbur, you take the leaves of burdock and make a wonderful poultice, much like plantain. Burdock and plantain, anytime you're out in the woods, anytime you're out in the field, you're injured in any way, shape, or form, grab your plantain, grab your burdock, kind of chew those leaves up, put it down on there, wrap another leaf around it for a poultice, and it's going to help a lot, a lot. Flax seeds have been used as a poultice for burns. Echinacea, again, echinacea is good for any kind of wound or injury. Um, use it as a tea or a wash, poultice for burns. It's astringent. It's going to help with its antiseptic properties. It's just really good. It also stimulates hyaluronic acid production in the body, which is the mortar that holds cells together. So it's really good for tissue injuries. Lamb's quarters. You can use a leaf poultice for burns. It's going to be a lot like plantain, very soothing. Labrador tea is actually one we talked about. Was it last week or a couple of weeks ago? Um, Medicinally, the leaves can be used for washes and burns. Wild hydrangea. We've got so many varieties of wild hydrangea, often called seven bark. It has many medicinal properties, but specifically this great bark can be used as a poultice for wounds. So it's very slick underneath, almost like slippery elm. It'd be very soothing. Slippery elm's another one you could use, very soothing. Um, Tamarack or larch tree. We get tamarack around here. The tea is very astringent and it's good for burns, just as I said before. Tulip tree would be used the same way. Northern red oak, any red oak, any oak. Let's just go ahead and say any kind of oak. The inner bark is incredibly astringent and used as a wash or poultice can be excellent for burns. Um, American bittersweet bark again. Bracken fern, same bracken fern. A lot of people collect fiddleheads as a wild food. Can be used. The root is actually poultice and used for burns and for sores. Regular old common cattail, the first plant every survivalist learns about foraging. The root, when pounded, produces a jelly-like, like a natural salve, again, almost like aloe, and you can put it on there. Um, other herbs, pearly everlasting, clintonia, that's stone root, agrimony, balsam fir, and again, slippery elm. I already mentioned that one. And then there's lady's mantle, and lady's mantle is so effective for so many things. This is very widely used in German folk medicine. Um, Father Kunzel said the lady's mantle, well boiled and drunk warm, relieves headaches, heals cold in the head, eye infections, toothaches when used as a gargle. It heals fever, burns, suppuration, and ulcers, which is why it cannot be more than enough recommended for women. Every woman after giving birth should diligently drink quite a lot of this herb for 8 to 10 days. Some children would still have their mothers, and many a widower his wife if they had known this gift from God. Furthermore, this herb boiled and drunk a lot takes a fever and burns in case of broken ribs, knocks from wood, stone, iron after severe falls. A great many people die from internal injuries. This wound quickly removes fever and burn and speedily heals, but in this case drinks 1 to 2 liters a day. That's quite a bit. Um, Externally, applied and crushed, lady's mantle heals wounds, stabs, cuts, and burns. Father Nape recommended, in addition to ladies' mantle, he recommended a poultice of sauerkraut. Why would you put sauerkraut on a burn or a wound? Well, it soothes. Cabbage is renowned for helping soothe, and come to think of it, mustard being in the same family as cabbage, maybe that's why they use the mustard poultice. But cabbage does not have the heat to it. But sauerkraut also is full of all that probiotic bacteria, which would help prevent infection. So I'm told sauerkraut is quite effective for burns and other injuries. It says a cook had the misfortune of scalding her hand and her arm up to the elbow with boiling water. Now, that's severe injury. Medical aid was immediately applied on the spot, but in spite of the most careful treatment, the wound did not heal for weeks. Now, the person had recourse to the remedies prescribed by me, which alleviated her pain almost instantaneously and eventually effected her complete cure. The applications were: 1. The whole wound was painted with the white of an egg and oil and bandaged with a wet cloth for the first few days. The bandage was renewed twice daily. 2. Injurious juices and dirt were extracted by a bandage of infused hay flour. During the cure, several ulcers formed. To heal these, a decoction of Phoenium gracium, or fenugreek, let's go with fenugreek, it's a little bit easier to say, was applied. By means of these remedies, which were alternately made use of, hand and arm were completely cured. There's an excellent example of kitchen medicine. I mean, you've got your sauerkraut, then after that, you're just talking egg white and oil. Hay flowers are widely used in Europe. They are literally just, dried wildflowers, they get from the hay fields. I can't get more specific than that, really. And then you're talking fenugreek. And fenugreek is just common. You'll see it in many spice cabinets, or you can order some. It Fenugreek seeds, and I imagine chia could be used in much the same way. When they soak, they swell up and they form a gel. And yeah, I imagine fenugreek or chia could pretty much be interchangeable when used as a poultice for burns. So there you go. That's many many options you can use, and I hope it helped you. If you ever get burned, of course, I help you. I hope you never get burned. Everybody needs to get burned once. So they learn not to touch the stove, but other than that, it can be a most unpleasant experience. There's few things more painful than a burn. Now let's get into our plant identification for the week, and I'm going to do a couple of small plants uh, that are too often overlooked. The first is the Pyrola family, the Pyrolaceae. This is the Pipsissewa or Chimphyla family. Out west, more often, you get or maybe up north actually, the Pipsissewa Chimphyla umbellata. Around here, we have the Pipsissewa Chimphyla maculata. It's often called alligator wintergreen or spotted wintergreen. And then there's a slightly larger Pyrola picta. They're small plants. They're green. Yes, they were the original source for wintergreen oil before people started making it from birch twigs. You'll probably find one of these most anywhere you live, and this is one of my go-tos for winter herbal medicine because I can go out and pick wintergreen, and it helps with fevers, it helps with throat infections, it helps, sore throat, cough, colds. It actually helps with bladder infections, urinary tract infections. Very, very useful plant. And it was included in most Native American smoking mixtures along with tobacco. So uh, they actually had their wintergreen pipe tobacco long before wintergreen cigarettes became an issue. So, all right, so let's talk about the Pipsissewa. The plants of the pyrola are forest dwellers. They thrive in the shades of others. These plants have evergreen leaves and slightly woody stems. The waxy-looking flowers are bisexual with 4 to 5 separate sepals, sometimes united at the base, or 4 or 5 separate petals. There are twice as many stamens as petals. The ovary is positioned superior and consists of 4 or 5 carpels, with the partition walls present, forming an equal number of chambers. It matures around a round capsule with numerous seeds. Worldwide, there are 3 genera and 46 species. The North American ones are listed below. And again, I'm reading from Thomas J. Epples in a day. The Chimphyla, the Pipsissewa, is the one I use most often. It does not have a strong wintergreen flavor, so be aware of that. The leaves are edible, tough and astringent. I will usually use them as a tea. Tea of the leaves is astringent, diuretic, and diaphoretic. Okay, so astringent tightens tissue, diuretic gets rid of excess fluid, diaphoretic helps break a fever, and can be used both internally and externally. It is basically identical to pyrola. That's the yeah, that's the larger one I told you, pyrola picta. Pipsissewa is being overharvested in many areas as an ingredient for soft drinks. Rather interesting. The pyrola, which is wintergreen proper, contains tannic acid and simple thioglycosides, especially useful as a diuretic for the kidneys and urinary tract infections. It's also helpful for sore throats. Externally, the plant is used to stop bleeding and heal bruises and insect bites. It is antispasmodic, and the properties will make the plant useful for nervous disorders such as epilepsy. The chewed roots can be used as a throat lozenge. So, only 3 members of this family that grow in North America. Easy plant to identify, easy plant to use and get to know. Pretty safe. I've never seen any contraindications with it. Now, the next, when we talk about a plant being over harvested, this one is definitely in danger of that. It's a very rare plant. Where it grows, it usually grows in abundance, but cannot be transplanted. These plants are called saprophytic. Saprophytes, we'll go with that. They grow kind of as a combination between a regular plant and a parasitic plant. They live off of some of the roots of what's growing around them. They live in very specific environments, and you cannot like take a seed and plant it somewhere else. It will not work. I mean, maybe if you plant 1,000 of them, one of them would survive. Who knows? They grow in the woods. They grow under shade. You will notice them because they are white. These plants have no chlorophyll. They are getting their energy from other plants and from the soil, and not so much from the sun. And they're called, most often where I live, Indian pipe or ghost pipe. Very small plants. They don't normally grow more than 3 or 4 inches tall. Other members of the family are the snow plant. I believe it's also called bear corn where I live. I haven't used bear corn. I'd have to get down on my hands and knees and try to make a positive identification, but I do believe they are in the same family, and I think that's the same plant. Uh, Pine drops, and either beech drops or false beech drops are how these are usually listed in the old herb books. These are the Monotropaceae family or the Indian pipe family. Now, Indian pipe is called that because it goes up and turns down like a candy cane. And if you flip that over, it would look like a pipe, right? It would look like an old church warden pipe. Well, all right, let's talk about first of all how you identify these. These plants are saprophytes, meaning they have no chlorophyll. They feed on dead organic matter in the soil. They are often white, yellowish, brownish, or red. That depends on how much sunlight they get and the pH of the soil. The leaves are alternate and reduced to scales. This is a super easy family to identify because very few plants grow white. Plants need chlorophyll to get their energy from the sun. These don't. So I'm not going to spend too much time on how to identify them. In fact, I don't think I need to say anything more than that. If you go in the woods and you look for small plants down on the floor of the forest in shady spots and a lot of leaves, this is what you're going to find if they grow in your area at all. Now, here's the deal. Indian pipe, and from what I understand, most members of the family have a sedative effect that is somewhat similar to opium. For that reason, when hippies find out about this, they tend to run to the woods and wipe it out. all those great conservationist, tree huggers tend to go into the woods and wipe them all out because it's a free high. Um, one, I recommend you don't do that. Uh, if for only the reason that one, you can wipe this plant out, it's not coming back. Okay, you don't want to do that. It is a very useful plant for many things. Two, there is some toxicity to this plant. It will give that person who misuses it a bad headache, a hungover feeling the next day. It's probably, although it has not been studied clinically to my knowledge, very hard on the liver and causes some autotoxicity. It's like I said about people smoking rhododendron buds. They're more likely to poison themselves and get very sick than they are to get that free high they think they're going to find out in the woods. There are many other much safer plants, and if you're going to use this one irresponsibly, I'd much rather you leave it alone. Okay. You can pick a few of these and dry them and make a tincture of them and use them for the purposes for which they're intended. For instance, according to Elpel here, Indian pipe or false beech shrub, a tea of the root is antispasmodic, nervine, and sedative. Okay, that's all he says about it. Well, a tincture of the root of the whole plant actually is far more effective than the tea, and you don't have to use as much. As far as the pine drops, Cheyenne used the tea of the stems and berries to prevent bleeding from the nose and lungs. I think that's about all the medicinal uses, but as you can see, this is a plant that could be very useful. For bleeding, for pain, for sleeplessness, for cramps and muscle spasms, and should be used responsibly. And I cannot overstate that because irresponsible use of this plant um, is, it's going to make it not available to future generations. I mean, some people say we can love a plant to death. Well, in this case, I think you're not so much loving the plant to death as misusing the plant to death. So if you harvest these, go to an area where they're abundant. They do grow very abundantly in the mountains of North Carolina. But where I harvest is where I see someone's about to do some real estate development. They're going to go in there and they're going to grade that area. They're going to kill everything on that site. If I can get in there, with permission, preferably, before they go in and start doing their work, then I feel very confident that I can responsibly harvest any plants on that lot. And I've found some very, very valuable plants that would be far too rare for me to harvest in another way. Ideally, you can move some of those plants off site and preserve them. That's not always possible, but if the plant's going to be destroyed anyway, it's better to make use of it than let it go to waste. That's my philosophy. And it would be really nice if a lot of organizations would start doing that in areas where there are rare plants and developers, because a lot of times developers don't want to even know if there's a rare plant on their site because they're afraid someone's going to call the EPA and they're going to have to stop work. Well, very few plants are actually on the list that would dictate that. I think basically an agent would have to have a real grudge against that builder to actually go on site and find one or two of those rare plants to actually stop work. It's a much better compromise. It's better for everybody if someone who is conscientious and knows what they're doing relocates those plants before they're destroyed. And, those that get damaged along the way can be used perfectly responsibly by herbalists, and those that can be transplanted, transplant. I think if we could start forming some little organizations and work with the developers, um, it would be beneficial for all parties. Somebody buys land, they want to put a house there. They don't want to invest $200,000 and the government come in and stop building. Okay, that's not fair to anybody. It would be a lot better if before any work was done, somebody could walk out there and assess the site and say, all right, look, here's what I found growing on your property. And either there's, nothing rare here, go straight ahead. Or there's something so rare here, you really need to back out of this deal. You're not going to be able to develop it. The government's going to get in your way. Okay. Being forewarned would be quite valuable. Or, there's some plants here that aren't really endangered, but they shouldn't be over harvested. And give me a weekend and let me bring a shovel and a wheelbarrow out here and I will move these plants for you and it's going to benefit all parties. There would probably be some of that, green environmental grant money for someone who would actually do such as that. I imagine. I haven't looked into it, but I think that would be an excellent thing. And in hard economic times, hey, maybe there's a job somebody that's into plants could actually look into. That could actually be a living. If you can coordinate with the real estate agents, the developers, the contractors, the people that run the grading equipment, and your local, state, and federal agencies you know, to do this, you could probably make a good living, and it would be an excellent thing to do. Y'all, you have a great week. Remember to enjoy the bounty, the incredible fall harvest, and be responsible and be a good steward. Always be a good steward, and have a great week. I'll see you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.